Good day to you, partner. I'm keen, and I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this forsaken camp.
Hey guys, Wheat Solo here, aka the Skeleton King. So we are in for a treat today. We have Top Woog, the Canadian Wonder, the Canadian Blunder, the most amazing non-American American of all time, after Charles de Gaulle, of course. May God rest his soul. We have Clay Golems versus level 1 Rathma, and it goes pretty well. Now again, quick caveat. We can curse ads, and that is not intended. It is a bug or whatever you'd like to call it this season. So for instance, right now he's trying to kill a Sanguine Bearer, which has 15 physical damage resistance, and he's able to amp it. And he still can't kill it, okay? So what I was kind of impressed with by Clay Golems is their single target DPS in this fight is pretty good. Why can't he kill the Sanguine then? He basically struggles to kill even one Sanguine. That's a little more complicated, and it takes some explaining. By the way, so Mendeln has 3 different unique phases that are of note, right? He's going to cast Sanguines, and then after that, he's going to cast a Sludge Bomb attack, and that, you'll notice it. Forget the exact name, I'm sorry. But he's going to cast Poison Creepers, and then there'll be an explosion on the ground outside of him. So when you see the Poison Creeper animation right now, you just run towards Mendeln, and you won't get hit by it. The other one, right, is the Sanguine Bearers. Now, the Sanguine Bearers don't really do anything bad. Yes, they can attack if you trap them, technically, which we'll see later, which is something that summons can do. It's just kind of hard to actually get them to not run towards Mendeln, because that's their #1 priority. If they touch Mendeln, he'll heal. Now, what people have done since, this first fight came out is they realized they can actually let Mendeln heal on certain builds, and it's really not that big of a deal. Now, again, would any top-tier build have to do this? No. But there are situations where, like budget or level 8, where maybe not taking more damage during the Sanguine phase is better than just trying to kill them and going to basically skip phase 1 sooner. Like, allow phase 1 to take longer, but then you take less damage and you won't run out of jubes. Now, as you saw right there, he did actually successfully trap a Sanguine. It didn't even seem that hard, but sometimes, like, it won't work. But anyways, and you can actually kill them like that, which is why I think Revives would be better, because Revives have something that Clay Golems don't. Now, if they killed that one Sanguine pretty easily, right, and they do pretty good damage to Mendeln, as you can see right now, where he's got 5 Clay Golems up for most of that, and an amp up, which, doesn't last long at all, because this Mendeln has 95 CDR. Why can't they kill the ads with any amount of speed, or I guess I should say a different word, consistency? The AI functions in Diablo 2 are very, very simple, and it's basically like mob, aggro radius, go attack thing that you're aggroed by, which is the most nearest enemy, almost always, right? Technically, bosses have slightly different AIs than that, but let's ignore that. If a Clay Golem is going to get aggroed, run over and attack, and then attack them, that should be the end of the story, right? No, because pets have a different function, which is return to summoner. Now, this function is basically designed to allow summons to not just wander off, and it's supposed to be helpful, right? Now, it's kind of not. With Clay Golem especially, they seem to have a very aggressive, like a very aggressive return to summoner, or, right, function. What that means is that there's a chance at any point, even if it seems like the Necromancer's not that far away, they will disengage, do the return to summoner function before re-aggroing a new enemy. Maybe that has to do with a slight movement by the enemy, but sometimes it seems like they won't even, what's the word for it? The enemy won't even move, and they'll just be like, oh, I got to return to summoner. Oh, okay, I re-aggroed. I'm going to run back. And it can happen seemingly at random, where it's like, I swear I'm close enough. Please don't do this. Just stick to the mob and attack them, but they won't do it. Now, purely single target, one enemy on the screen, it seems to happen less often, but technically there are always the Ice Spires. And if you actually watch this fight a little closer, you'll notice it seems like there are times where the Clay Golem will do its return to summoner function and then aggro on to the Spire. If you're wondering what summons are what's the word for it, have like less aggressive return to summoner functions, Druid pets, Amazon pets, and revives. Basically, revives I think don't even have a return to summoner function anymore, and that had to do with fixing them because revives used to be like the worst AI in the game, and I think part of it had to do with this. I think there was actually another thing going on with their AI, which was basically like it was like combating the monster AI with now their pet AI. But basically one way to fix it, I believe, was to remove that return to summoner function. Now, if Clay Golems didn't have the return to summoner function, they would be overall much better pets because Clay Golems actually do have one use. You might have seen that little meme early on in the video. That was real John, and he was convinced that he was right and we were wrong, that Clay Golems are really, really good. I guess I should clarify more. Clay Golems were better than we thought, especially early on. And in his defense, they are good at one thing. They're pretty good at trap spam. They really are. Are they the best necromancer? No. By the way, I mean like day one trap spam. But if you want to play the most brain-dead day one trap spam, maybe I'd give you Clay Golems are the best. I'm not even sure, but they got to be on the list for like top 5 day one trap spam, right? But there's better necromancers day one, and there's better brain dead builds like a couple days into the game where you just get a little more gear. Okay. So, anyways, if they're kind of good at that, if they didn't have this return to summoner function, they'd actually be better in general in all situations in the game. As I said, if there's one enemy, they're pretty good. But if there's more, they seem to return to summoner more often. As you can see right now, there's only Rathma on the screen, and it seems like they kind of just lose aggro for no reason and want to return back to the Necromancer before re-aggroing the enemy. If you're wondering about their frame data, which is useful to know, they can attack once every like 19 frames. I think with a beast they would attack once every 23 frames or so. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. But because of this weird pathing they have, or AI, let's assume they attack once every 25 frames at best. Which still isn't that bad, but as you noticed, he couldn't really kill the Bone Prism. So remember the Sanguine Bearers and how he struggled to kill them, and now he's kind of struggling to kill the Void Knights? He's literally casting Clay Golems on top of himself, but they're not attacking the Bone Prism. Why are Clay Golems like this? We don't know, but they really are the worst AI in the game right now, which is unfortunate because the only benefit they have is they are so simple to use. You just cast them whenever you want, and they should function. But again, not only might they not aggro what you want them to attack, they have to return to summoner if you summon them too far away. So remember that return to summoner function? Well, guess what? If you summon a Clay Golem a little too far away from yourself, like on top of an enemy, even half a screen away, they might walk to you before they can go, okay, now I can actually run my function, attack an enemy. Okay, I think I've beaten this horse dead into the ground, covered it with cement, and then put it into the guy's bed, right, in like the fucking Godfather. So I'm sorry I've talked about this so much, but it is really hard to describe how bad their AI is and how it affects so many phases in this fight specifically, and also just general gameplay. One interesting note, Clay Golems basically are never trapped by Bone Prison. Now, one was in a Bone Prison right then, but I think their speed is so high, they like walk out of the Bone Prison before they're trapped. Okay. So, as you've noticed, he wasn't able to kill the Bone Prisons well. He casted it right next to him. They wouldn't attack it. At one point, he was even casting Bone Spear to try to get out of it himself. Now, that time, he was trapped in a Bone Prison right next to all the Clay Golems, and their splash killed it, like, super fast. So it's not the DPS that is the issue. It's just whether or not you can get the Clay Golem to attack the right target. Now, let's go back to Beast. He's using a Dominion. Now, is Dominion the best option for this fight? Maybe, and I say that because I think if you had a +3 amp, +3 Clay Golem, +3 Blood Warp, that would be a pretty sick Dominion to have for this fight. If you have a Beast, though, basically you're getting a 20% DPS increase on your Clay Golems. Does the AR matter? Maybe at lower levels, but if you're like a high level, I don't think it would have any effect, just the way they run AR computations for summons in this game. But the Beast gives you one more option. For one, if your 5 Clay Golems hit faster, and they basically do similar DPS to 6, you don't need to cast 6 Clay Golems. And Beast also allows you to transform into a Werebear, which, again, how useful is that? Because you can't cast Clay Golems or Curses. I just feel like maybe there's some... If somebody really wanted to do this fight, right, but they couldn't curse ads, maybe the best way to do it would be to run Beast, and then for certain phases, you would transform into a Werebear, right, and then transform back out. I don't know. But anyways, at least you'd have the option. And if it's almost as good as the Minion, or as good, and you have more options, and my dad always used to tell me as a kid, you know, options are always nice. So, yeah, there you go. So this fight is about to be over. No, it's not. He's at 50% health. Wow, this is slow. Now, I actually think the Void Knights are pretty easy to kill. Yeah, right, pretty easy. Let's just say it at that. There's one interesting thing. Since we can curse ads, why not just run Fire Golems? Or why not just run Fire Golems in general for this fight, someone might be wondering. Well, it's because fire resistance is the highest on this fight by a high margin. For instance, the Clay Golem, or the physical damage resistance, is 50. So if you amp them for about -50, you're doing full damage. The fire resistance is 75 on the ads, and that is incredibly high, and it would make it really, really hard to kill the ads because, again, he's stuck in a bone prison down there, but then eventually... So another interesting side note is that in a bone prison, you can't blood warp, but eventually the debuff wears off, and then you can blood warp out. So that's kind of cute. It doesn't even take that long. Like, he was in that bone prison for what, like 3 seconds, 4 seconds? I think he maybe forgot it doesn't last that long, and that he can blood warp out quicker, because early on... or maybe he just was thinking, maybe I can kill it? I don't know. But yeah, so now you see he just gave up, and he'll just wait a bit and then blood warp out, and it's like 2-3 seconds. It's not that bad, I guess, actually. So, you know what? Never mind. Transforming into a werebear would be stupid. Is Beast still maybe the best option or a good option? Yes. Okay. So anyways. Moving on again. This is so stupid. One of the interesting things is the ads can be cursed at like full effectiveness. So they have like no CDR and curses last forever on them. So that's kind of cute. But anyway, so would Fire Golems be an option? Normally, no. I think you probably could do the fight with Fire Golems, but it'd be really, really tough, and there's no reason to do it. Now, with curses, I think they would be better than Clay Golems. Topwig is not convinced, because even with a max LR and that we can curse them, you would be doing, let's say, -35 to -25. So you'd have, you know, 2/3 of your DPS or 75% of your DPS, which is actually quite a bit less. The benefit is, though, is that the Fire Golem pulse is bigger than the Clay Golem splash radius, which means you would be much more consistent on attacking things around you. So again, remember that thing I was talking about where, you know, golems randomly disengage? Remember I talked about that and said I was not going to talk about it again? Well, one of the reasons why Fire Golems are better is even if they're not attacking an enemy, guess what? They're still doing their fire radius pulse. And although, yes, their single target attack does do very good DPS, well, if at least they're doing half of their damage, because half their damage is the AoE pulse, that's a good way to think about it, and half of it is the single target attack, then they're always at least doing half of their damage, which is really, really nice. Especially in a situation with ads, where the AoE pulse is going to be overall better most of the time. So instead of doing half the damage possible, let's say there's 2 ads next to each other, the Fire Golem is actually doing 66% of their damage that they normally could be doing. What is the Clay Golem doing at this point? 0%. So that's why I think Fire Golems would be overall better. So now we're in Phase 3. It's basically going to be the same thing all over again. The only difference is that Rathma and Mendeln have a shared life pool. Another thing is the only reason we can do this fight now is basically level 1 Rathma does no damage, and level 8 Rathma, certain attacks do as much damage as they used to do before they even created difficulty scalings. Now, why is that? It's because the fight would not have worked with difficulty scaling. Some of the damage numbers were way too high, and so they tried to fix it, and instead they basically nerfed some attacks down to near 0 damage, and the attacks that were a problem now do an appropriate amount of damage. But on level 1, it is super, super easy. So, again, remember when Landis 3 did Rathma Mendeln as a doo-doo summoner last season? That was pretty impressive. And although this is still impressive, just keep that in mind. This fight is kind of whack these days. I actually think Declone level 8 is super, super cool, even though you can curse ads. And I actually think they should think about allowing ads to be cursed. If you're wondering why you can't curse ads, there's AI issues, but they could give them all the primeval tags, so then you couldn't use things like dim vision, etc. By the way, right now you can decrepify them. And the thing is with... I actually said that right. I hate myself for that. I'm going to say decrepify, just because. Wait, no. Decrepify is wrong. Oh, it is decrepify. That's the one guy always tried to get me to say it right, and I thought I said it right on accident. Anyways, so yeah, decrepify is the wrong way. I just think it sounds cooler, so I'm going to keep saying that. That's probably why I always say it. I just think it sounds cooler that way. Anyways, sorry. Slow movement used to work on some ads in these fights, and they patched it out. So if we're trying to go off the honor system of if we can curse enemies, what curses would they allow? Decrepify would probably not be one of them, okay? Now, yes, you can decrepify the ads in Uber Tristam, but because we had evidence of them not enjoying slow movement in this fight, let's assume we can't use it. So those curses would all be removed, but even then, there's basically problems with certain builds having access to weapon proc curses, and it would make the fight too easy for them. In my opinion, just let them do it. But, you know, that's a dev decision and not mine. It wouldn't make Necromancers much better. It would actually just help buff other classes more. So, what are the options for this fight going forward with curses? Let's say we don't use the Decrepify. What build would be better if we know Clay Golems suck? I think Fire Golems would be better. But what about something a little more interesting? What about something like this? Max Revive, Max Desecrate. You put all your remaining points into Amp, Curse Mastery, and Lower Resist. And you use Desecrate. Again, you don't get any of the other Desecrate synergies. I think that would be a cool way to do a summoner-focused build while getting around the fact that it's really hard, even for revives, to be able to consistently kill the Bone Prisons. And again, it wouldn't even be like completely out of the ordinary, because you'd want to Desecrate on top of yourself to create bodies for you to revive to kill the Bone Prison. So that's why I think it's kind of like an interesting little... It's a summoner build, and yes, the Desecrate's a little better than normal, but again, we have so many extra points on a revive-based summoner for this fight, it kind of works out, right? Like, we would get some more ED for our summons, they'd all hit a little bit harder, which again, if you're having trouble keeping up all of your summons at all points, you want each summon to be better, not necessarily more summons, right? Like, Grimm's Burning Dead would just be a nightmare. Funny enough, Eternity would be an option for that build regardless, just because Eternity is just so good. There are times where you could get all of your revives up. So, that's an option. Topwood also is thinking about doing Revive CE. Now, why? Well, because Revive, Corpse Explosion, Desecrate, Amp all kind of synergize with each other, and I think that could be interesting as well. Just because the Corpse Explosion would just do, you know, AoE damage basically on most of the screen, and so that way you're basically getting a little more AoE, but you're still doing a summoner-based build, because let's face it, CE wouldn't do a lot of damage. It would just give you something to do with your extra skill points, because they all kind of work together. So that's basically our ideas right now. Again, the fight has these weird, interesting things about it, and so it's like, this is all, what's the word for it? Just for fun. But maybe next season you'll be able to continue to curse ads. So it would kind of be interesting for us to come up with ways to use that for Necromancer for the future. I'm also working on a few other things like Black Souls, and trust me, don't get excited. They're absolute trash. It's just interesting how trash they are. And now we're going to steer the gear. There's one thing to note about this gear. He has 0 PLR. Everything else is pretty standard, and by that I mean he's got, you know, Nature's Pieces, +2 max res cores, multiple sockets on most of his gear. One thing he wanted to point out is Bone Flame does nothing special for this fight. It's just a pretty good shield, but you really don't need the PDR, and there would be just better options. There's just not enough physical damage in the fight. I also want to point out one thing. I think Train Gloves would be just better than Grave Palms, but I always say that, and I'm sure you guys are sick of me saying that. Besides that, the gear is solid, just not great, and again, 0 PLR. He should have some, but the fight's so easy right now, he kind of got around it. As you can see, he had plenty of jubes left. Well, Skelly King out, guys. GG.
Come play with us, Daddy.